All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm here with another episode of React Wednesdays. As you can see, we have a pretty full house today, which should be pretty exciting. We're here to talk about a pretty cool React tool that I know we want to get into. So first of all, my name is TJ VanToll. I work as a developer advocate here at Progress. And with me today, Dan, you want to sort of take it from here?
Hey, I'm Dan Wilson, and I work for Digital Primates. We do a lot of enterprise React and have the Enterprise React newsletter. If you're interested, go to tinyurl.com/er-news. It's all free. Pete?
Sure. Hi, I'm Pete DeLillo, senior developer at Digital Primates. Worked here for the last 14 years. Started out doing Flash development, building all sorts of applications, video players. Since transitioned to doing strictly JavaScript with a focus on React. And for the last 5 years, had the pleasure of working on some pretty amazing high-profile video apps for a large broadcaster.
And then we've got the Realize team here as well. Why don't you all take this away? I don't know what order you want to introduce yourself in.
Go on, I'll jump in. So nice to meet you all. My name's Henry. I'm from the UK, but currently living in Bogota in Colombia. My background is in finance. So I started out as an investment consultant and got into programming by writing Python scripts to help with me doing macroeconomic presentations. And it's kind of evolved from there, really. That was probably about 2015. Most recently, I've been focusing on full stack web development with a bent towards Node and React and all things JavaScript, really.
Yeah, I'm Harry Clifford. I started coding actually all the way back in high school. That was more Java, and got into Java and C in college. Also studied visual art in college, so I can bring that. I hope I've brought that to the Realize team a little bit. But yeah, similar to Henry, I've been focusing on JavaScript mainly, Express backends, React frontends in particular.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Horatio. Thank you for having us once again. My background is in information systems, so I did a lot of work with SQL databases and whatnot. And recently, I transitioned more into full stack engineering and focusing on Realize for React, and in general, just trying to contribute to the open source community.
Hey guys, my name is Fan. Thank you so much for having us. I have a background in education, but got started with programming when I was really back in the Neopets days. I thought that decorating user lookup pages with like CSS was the bomb.com. And the same as everybody else on the team, I'm currently doing full stack development with a focus on React on the front end and Node and Express on the back end.
Very cool. So I guess to kick us off, so the tool you're working on is Realize. So could you start with just an overview, what it is, what sort of problem it solves for React developers, why people might want to check it out, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we probably all should have said that in our introductions. I completely missed that one off, but yes, focusing on Realize for React at the moment. But to give you an overview on what the tool is then. So effectively, Realize for React is a browser extension. It's available in the Chrome and Firefox stores. And you can use it to basically visualize your React component tree. And also it gives you additional information on how state flows through your application. It was born really out of, as a group, we've all worked with React a lot. Whilst, particularly from my perspective, I really like the way with React, you have this sort of reusable component architecture. But I find that the modularity of code can sometimes get a bit out of control, and it becomes unwieldy to get a holistic sort of high level view of what's going on in the application. We shared this kind of view across the team really, and we decided we wanted to create an extension that was available, open source extension, to kind of help developers with that goal really. And we kind of have it's a humble goal more than anything. We're not trying to totally change the workflow that React developers have with working with React. We're trying to basically make it easier for React developers to get a grasp of that modularization, and that's why we created it.
Cool. So I'm curious too, like in comparison to, because I'm mostly familiar, and I'm guessing a lot of people watching this are more familiar with just like the React developer tools, right? The sort of canonical ones. And I guess like the appeal to me, at least when I first saw Realize, is that it looks like it's almost like a simpler approach on it, because I know sometimes I go into the React developer tools and it's like I feel stupid, right? Because it makes my app look like it's like my app shouldn't have that much going on, and I'm seeing this tree that looks like I'm building like Facebook.com or something. So I'm curious, was that one of the goals, to just make things like simpler and easy to use, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I found, like, when using React, I found myself drawing out the component hierarchy every time, like drawing out on paper how the state is flowing over the application. And I kind of thought that, like, why isn't this, an aspect of the React developer tools already? Like, being able to really see how it all flows and intuitively understand something at a glance, I think would be a lot more, beneficial than. I also found myself, just clicking through the nested component structure in the, vanilla React tools. So that was absolutely one of the big motivators there.
That's the thing, yeah. In the React Dev Tools, sorry, Horatio. In the React Dev Tools, the component hierarchy is shown as a deeply nested object. So, whilst that has use to it, it's like, from a usability perspective, you're going to get a better holistic view by having some sort of visualization that shows you the component tree together at a high level. So yeah,
just to add a little bit on what Harry touched on before, we wanted essentially to build a better user experience, so the user could clearly see the components and how the state flow and whatnot, and they're able to search through the components if they're looking for a specific one. So we wanted to make it very easy for that.
I know that's certainly. Oh, sorry. I know that's certainly the piece that enticed me to it. And I was telling Dan this, that, like, when thinking about React, like, having something more visual and just recognizing that some people are more visual learners, that I think having that hierarchy be displayed in that way just made it very appealing to me over just the nested text inside of objects.
100%.
Yeah. Especially with front end, I would assume,
I know, Horatio, you were going to show off a little bit of it. Do you want to do that now, or bring that up sort of while we're chatting about it? Just because I think it might help to have like a visual of what this looks like to make it a little bit easier. I know I want to dive in a little bit more on the technical side of this too, but I think for our audience especially, just sort of seeing what the tool looks like could help.
Absolutely. So I'll just share the screen and let me know if you guys can see it.
Yep, we'll work on bringing it up. I'm not seeing it quite yet. I know when we tested this out. Oh, there we go. All right, so. All right,
perfect.
I think we're good to go.
Awesome. So essentially, we had it's an extension that works for both Chrome and Firefox. It will just test it for Chrome, but we can quickly bring up Firefox because it's very, very similar. So the way the app works, essentially, you have to have React, and we'll go into the nitty-gritty details later. For now, just have like a high overview. You need to have React DevTools installed as well as Realize for React. And you simply, as you could see, we chose React.js because we know, obviously, they're built in React. So we can simply pull up the DevTools. And once we pull up the DevTools, I guess it's, yeah.
I'm curious. So building on top of the React DevTools, are you leveraging like do the sort of official React DevTools have like APIs that you can help you, or?
Sort of. We used the DevTools implementation has this internal algorithm with a function called onCommit fiber root, and that actually is executed every single time there's any update to the DOM. Like anytime the virtual DOM actually paints to the legitimate real DOM, this function onCommit fiber root is behind the scenes executed. So we basically just wrapped a closure around that function to extract all the data and send it off to our extension. So we're kind of ripping it from the React DevTools each time there's a state change.
Okay.
And And speaking of state changes, that's when the components appear. And as we can see here on React, on their official website, we're able to see the entire components from like a very high overview. And as we zoom in, and let's say we click on a component, we also get the state, the props, and the children if they have it. And we can click for more information on any of them.
Very handy.
Yeah, and the reason that the components don't have full names is because through the bundle the code was uglified. So in production, usually the code has like minified, so to speak, component names. So if a user wants to search for the component that's E, for example, they can just search for E, and they will all just sort of like pop up more.
Yeah, the use you get out of it is probably a little bit more useful on when you're sort of in development mode, because obviously Webpack, when it's bundling up a React application, uglifies everything and turns it into this stew of horribleness, which is what you see there, the single letter names. But yeah, in development node, obviously you've got your full component names there, so you can quickly see what the parent nodes are, the children nodes below it. You can click on a node to get some additional information. We've also got one thing from doing a bit of research when we started and chatting to the developer community, and also people who'd created similar tools in the past. We decided quite early on that we wanted to focus more on the kind of user interactions rather than going overboard on the feature side of things. So we've got like panning and zooming. The tree dynamically resizes depending on the size of the data set. And a particularly nice thing, which we find very helpful, if you click the state button, it should show up where state's sitting within the application. So nodes with a blue disk behind them are stateful nodes. So state is held at that component level. And then lines down from those nodes going from parent to child show the flow of state down through the component tree as well, which is pretty handy when you're trying to debug stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious from a state perspective, considering there's like 6,000 ways of doing state in React, right? So what ways do you support? Is this just like the hook support? Is it the functional? Like, I'm just curious, right?
Yeah, so this is one of the huge questions we had as well, where it's, of course, it's all a work in progress, but we have like, the classic class-based state, that works. Hooks as well work. Redux technically works. It's not like fully supported. Ideally, we would have some way to visualize like where the Redux store is connecting to any individual component. But you still will be able to see like where the state flows from the Redux store, just not where it like really originates from. But yeah, the main ones that are working on are like traditional class-based stateful components and hooks.
Yeah, Harry spent a lot of time going through managing that state side of things, but also on the recursive algorithm on the back end, where we pass through the component tree, stripping out the unnecessary data, because React itself passes a lot of data down that isn't to do with the engineer passing it down. So Harry spent a lot of time clearing that out, which comes back to what you were saying, TJ, about React dev tools just having an overload of data, really, that it kind of reduces its usability to some degree.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, so just real quick, we wanted to also, we built like a quick application just in development mode, just to showcase how it will look with the component's name. So we just essentially this is just a simple application when you can just add more components. And then, as you can see, they have the full component's name, and you can search for them and just see as well the props and state and etc.
What are you using to draw this out? Is it D3 or something like that?
It's D3. So we're effectively, the backend is sending the data over. D3 is passing that and then building the tree out of it. And we use D3 for a lot of the interactions. I don't know if you worked with D3 before, but it's a insanely extensive library. So
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, pretty much had all the tools. Yeah, it's wild. It had all the tools we needed, from both data parsing, showing the sort of painting onto the canvas, as well as getting the interactions shown as well, which has been awesome. It's got a steep learning curve though, D3. There's so many different aspects to consider, but it's an awesome library.
I'm curious, do you use React at all in the extension itself? Is it?
We don't.
Okay.
Given that the kind of it's a reasonably simple front end, so we opted not to use it. But as we'll go into a bit later on when we talk a bit more deeply about the extension environment, building extensions for Chrome and Firefox has lots of nuances as well that makes life a lot harder. So we try to keep things as simple as possible, really.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to that part. I don't want to lose what we're doing here talking about the tool itself, but definitely put a check mark by it. Let's talk about how this thing actually is bolted together. As I'm curious. I'm sure other people are. So it looks like there's a way here for state. You can search for components. What else would a React developer find useful here?
So like one thing is we tried to display like pertinent information about any node. So if you click on Horatio fruit container, for example, that should have state and then the types of hooks, for example, that are being utilized. And yeah, so here we can see like this component has 3 use state hooks, and their respective actual values are stored up in that state object. And hopefully this composite data structure front end rendering is user friendly, and you should be able to explore state rather deeply if it's very deeply nested in an intuitive way.
I'm curious how deep you had to dig into the React internals to be able to get some of this information, just because I really like how this is presented and it's nice and organized and simple. But in my head, it's like, how do you know a component is using 3 hooks? Like that just seems like some dark arts sort of stuff.
Yeah, so this is. Oh, go ahead, Henry.
I was gonna say I can confirm it is dark arts. Harry's the resident wizard who found out, so I passed on to him.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned this before, but we were using this React DevTools API. They actually install a hook on the I believe it's either the document or window object. I'm forgetting right now, but they install this like React DevTools global hook object that has all this internal data inside of it. And like, you're totally right. It is dark magic. It's like 400 nested objects within. It gets insane. But so they do store things like debug hook types is how I actually pulled the hook names. And like that is actually one issue I had. It gave me the name of the hook type, and I could get the data from that hook, but I couldn't get like the name within the code of, like, say you're using a use state hook, you assign the actual state to a variable, and like getting the name of that variable seems actually impossible from the way we're getting this data in the first place. So that's one thing I'd like to work on in the future.
Yeah, the React backend stuff, we kind of went over various different options in terms of like methods that we could use to get the data that we wanted out of the tree, out of the component hierarchy, or out of the React application. We settled for this because the quality of the data that came out through DevTools is decent. Obviously, they are the ones who are building React, so they know how to get the data out nicely. But we also looked at other ways as well of trying to do it. Perhaps one way was looking at doing a package where the user could install an npm package, and we'd pass through the code base and try and get the component hierarchy out via that way. But we settled on this way, and we think it works pretty well. Harry spent a lot of time ensuring that it was performant, because React websites do some very crazy stuff, doing multiple state changes for a single state update, multiple renders, for a single state update. There's also lots of crazy weirdness in there with the data, like circular references and stuff. So I know Harry spent a large bulk of the time sort of wading through all that complexity.
How are circular? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but like circular references, I'm curious how that would work. Like, because wouldn't that break do you just have to like break the chain sort of deal?
Yeah, it's super weird. Like the way they're doing things is just kind of insanity. Like you actually had to like state is stored as a key on each like component object on their end, but it's actually like the way that what is in that value, you can basically tell what the state is from that. So like if you have a for example, if you have multiple use state hooks, they actually store it in a linked list. But what's super weird is it's not like a null terminating linked list. It terminates with a self reference at the very end. So it's basically a linked list that just ends in a circular reference. I don't know what the benefit of that is, but
it's a Mobius strip.
Yeah, exactly. So our actual implementation was just shaving off past this arbitrary amount, just saying like this is the end of recursion now, because we were having many issues with recursion that never stopped. And also one thing, we'll definitely get into the Chrome extension backend messaging stuff, but you actually had to basically JSON stringify any data that you're going to be sending anywhere. So circular references, they really don't play well with that at all.
Probably extracting the data from the React Dev was our hardest challenge, just because, as Harry mentioned, it was complicated.
So, Dan, Pete, do you have any other questions about the tool itself while we've got it up here on the screen? And I'll also mention, too, for those of you watching on Twitch, if you want, feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat as well, and I can run it by while we've got the team here as well.
I guess I don't know if we're going to get to this later, but do you guys know next steps or like next features you'd like to get in?
Yeah, certainly. So when we set out to create this, actually, I said that we did some research, speaking to developers, and as a result of that research, we sort of pared in a few aspirations that we had. One of those was looking at incorporating render times. So what we'd love to do is to visually display to users the render times of the individual components, but also in the context of the parent component. So we'd like to try and show the information in a manner that allows or gives React developers ideas on how they can improve load times, basically. So, for example, if your form component is rendering in 100 milliseconds and you've got 10 children component, but one of those is taking up 90% of the render time, that might be a place you can go look at to try and improve the performance of the overall app. So that was something we had initially in our scope, but we ended up paring it back just so that we could focus on the user interactions. That's something we'd really like to focus on. I know expanding and collapsing nodes, it'd be great if we could click on a node or do something with a node to basically collapse the children below it to allow you to focus in on certain areas. I know the error handling is a little bit wonky and could do with an improvement. So if anyone wanted to help out with that, it would be much appreciated. And I think just general design and stuff like that, really. I know, Horatio, you wanted to check sort of do some improvements to autocomplete as well, right?
Yeah, so the search functionality right now, if we were to go in our development mode, if you search for a component, let's say you search for Apple, to be able to scroll down and to go down on your keypad and click on it and automatically point you to that component. So that's something if anyone would want to help us out with.
Yeah, on the repo, we've got a section on contribution. So if any of your audience is interested in getting involved, this is an open source extension. We'd love people to get stuck in. There's some instructions on the repo on how you can do that. And all of our details are on there as well. So we're happy to chat with anyone who wants to get involved.
I'm curious too. One thing we haven't covered is like I'm curious sort of the why here behind like even like a business perspective, like, do you all work for the same company? Did you all how did you find each other and get interested in building this?
Well, so we built this project through a kind of organization called OS Labs, which is basically an open source accelerator that's attached to an engineering residency called Codesmith, which we're all part of. So we met through that really, and started building the extension as part of a project on open source labs. So that was where we all got connected up really, because obviously I'm down in Colombia. These guys are mostly based in New York. We perhaps wouldn't have come across each other otherwise.
Yeah, cross paths otherwise.
Yeah, TJ, I was going to post a repo link in the live comments, but I don't seem to be able to do that.
Yeah, I just put it in there. Not sure, you might have to go to Twitch directly to do that. But yeah, I just dropped the link in there. So if anybody's curious in getting involved, the link is there and you can check it out to learn more.
Perhaps we should jump into the weeds on the process we went through building it then. Perhaps.
Well, before we do that, I just wanted to touch on something you said a minute ago where you wanted to focus on like the rendering time of each component. That's pretty interesting because there seems to be a lot of attention people are placing on re-rendering and what gets re-rendered. And they seem to overlook the fact that maybe it is one component that's bogging the render time down. Do you think that's a function of just where the community's at from a thought leadership perspective, or is that more a function of just the tools aren't there to find slow components very easily?
Again, it comes back to when you work with React Dev tools, it has so much rich information about your application, but it's not really shown in the most intuitive manner. So you can get performance data in there. It's shown as a flame graph, which gives you some degree of insight into what's going on. But we feel that we could utilize that information to try and suggest things to developers in a more intuitive manner, and give them kind of quickly actionable insights into where they can focus. And I think it all comes back down to really the general focus on performance in React applications. Obviously, it comes down to the fact that users are pretty fickle, and if they get to a website and it doesn't load quick enough, they will clear off pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But also, I just find you have to be very methodical when you're building a React application to ensure it's performant. There's lots of bear traps where you can make small mistakes that have a big impact on performance times. So I think, as you say, there seems to be a lot of interest in the performance side of things in the community, and I think that's with good reason. And I think perhaps extending this tool to offer some degree of a solution for that for developers would be a really interesting way to take it going forwards.
Yeah, I like that a lot because I've been doing JavaScript for way too long at this point, and I've never found a performance tool that I've liked. Like you can throw React out of the context, even like the performance tools in Chrome, Firefox. Sometimes if you have like an absolutely overt issue, you can see some sort of spike and go okay. But I think the tool that I've never seen exist is something that can get you down to like the component level. That says like here's a problem, or to find like an outlier sort of in your tree, that you wouldn't expect. Like maybe you have like super deep complicated module component that you like expect to take a lot of time, but like it'd be interesting to see like if a header, like your header component showed up as like red from a performance perspective, so you could go like, well, wait a minute, what in the world could the header possibly be doing? Sort of deal.
100%.
Would certainly would help settle a lot of the arguments around misuse or use of the use callback or use memo hooks as well.
Give me data or give me death. There's actually well-established metrics and when a user will bounce out of a web page or an app. And it used to be 8 seconds they would give it to load, but those numbers have actually shrank over time. Now, the people that are selling you this information will tell you it's something. Really, the real number depends on how much the user wants it and how else they can get it. But if you're doing straight up e-commerce and you're basically spinning around in circles, your website or web app isn't loading, you've lost a customer. And it could be a lot of them. A long time ago in a land far, far away, I helped out on a e-commerce company's web application for a humongous cancer telethon. This is in like 2010. We did about 1 million e-commerce transactions in 6 hours, which at the time was amazing. And the next time they ran it, they had like a 45-minute outage period. People lost their jobs over it. Millions of dollars wasn't made because there's a 6-hour window. You have a 3-hour telethon. It runs twice. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, and I think too, a lot of the browser tools are good at catching the really like the page load type of thing. Like a lot of the tools are oriented around that. Like Chrome will help you say like, oh, you have too much JavaScript or this sort of thing is blocking. But the tools that get you into like the nitty gritty and code performance, that's where like things get gnarly and really hard to follow for me. So I think there's a lot of promise in that sort of direction with a tool like this.
It plays very
at least
nicely
you have a
into the
point to
visualization.
divide and conquer.
Yeah. So if there's no other questions on the sort of this UI itself, and we always come back to it, I would like to get into the story of the extension itself, because that's a bit of a Wild West territory for me. Because like, I mean, I've never built an extension for Chrome or Firefox, and I'm actually like, maybe this is naive of me, but I didn't even realize you could build an extension that worked in both browsers. So
yeah, and as we do that, I've realized that we can't see Fan because her video camera is misbehaving. And so unfortunately, I can see if someone else looks like they're about to speak, but I can't see if she is. So I want to give her some space if she'd like to chime in with anything that's been said so far.
Oh yeah. No, just like I agree a lot with just kind of like everything that everybody has been saying so far in terms of just you know, like our vision for creating the extension and like the problems that we saw it solving, and also just kind of like the kinds of problems that we are going to continue working on. Like like everybody has like said it super duper well. So
yeah, that's fine. And you know, but in the future, if you just want to talk, it's not going to be seen as an interruption. Like I say, I can see everyone else as they inch closer to the video camera, but I can't see you. So just talk and we'll stop talking, and you know, it'll be your time.
Sounds great.
We lost Fan's webcam halfway through the project, which was a major loss.
Yeah.
So.
It is funny, like at some point you could write almost like a psychological thing on like what sort of subtle body language you do to say like, I want to talk next in a group of people. Because it is really like, you can pick up on it, but I couldn't really sort of lay out exactly what those cues are.
I don't know either, but I can tell you this much. My internal clock is measured in nanoseconds. Like as soon as someone's done talking, I have something to say. And it is, it's a consistent struggle to rein it back. I just want you to know that.
It's even more difficult with the delay on
Oh yeah, that's great. Anyway, so on to how extensions are made, it would seem.
I'll talk a bit about the extension environment then. So as you alluded to, it's not clear that extensions that are compatible for Chrome are compatible for Firefox, but there is a web extensions API behind everything, and it's broadly aligned between Firefox and Chrome. There's a few key differences, and we were lucky in the areas that we worked, we were able just to translate from Chrome over into Firefox without any issues. But there's some things that people who are starting out with building an extension need to be aware of, and that is that MDM focuses more towards using promises as opposed to callbacks. So when you build it, whereas Chrome is very much doesn't have support for promises, it's only callbacks. So when you're building your code base, if you want it to be compatible across both platforms, it's important to focus on the callback side of things.
And real quick, MDM is Mozilla something?
Mozilla Developer Network, which sort of back up the Firefox ecosystem.
Okay.
So when you're building an extension, it can be cross-platform compatible. Just bear in mind and do a bit of research before you kick off about how that works. But generally, just talking about the dev flow of working with an extension and the kind of environment that you're working in, it's very, very different from working with web applications, which is where a lot of my experience lies. So we had to invest quite a bit of time up front in the project to understand that. And it's all generally born from the fact that a lot of sensitive data goes through your browser. And therefore, Chrome extensions need to have strict permissions rules in order to ensure that users' data isn't illicitly stolen. And the way it does that is by basically breaking down the environment you work in into various different parts. So for example, as you saw in the demo, we've got our panel in the DevTools panel. That is one part of the DevTools environment that we were working with. That we have that, and we have behind the scenes a background script, which is basically a piece of JavaScript code that is running behind the browser whenever the user is using the browser. And then you have another area which is called content scripts, which is actual individual scripts that you pass into the live tab that the user has open on their page. And they make it difficult for those three parts to talk to each other on purpose, because if you were passing data between them, you could extract that data out and send it off to an external source. So when you're building an application, you have to be very aware of the anatomy. Building an extension, you have to be very aware of the anatomy of the web extension environment, and work out which parts of your code base go and sit in the right parts of the code base, and ultimately how you're going to get those individual parts to talk to one another. And this has implications for when you're deploying your Chrome extension as well. So one thing that we found out as we got to the deployment stage, trying to put it onto the Chrome store and the Firefox store, the permissions that you use will affect the process that you have to go through to get your sign off on your extension. So if you're using very holistic permissions or very sort of broad-based permissions like we were to start with, it'll take them a long time to get back to you. And you'll sit in review for a long period of time, and it'll be a real pain. So you've got to be very thoughtful about the type of permissions that you use. We initially started out by having it where Harry's background hook, where we kind of got the information out of React, was being injected into every page that the user was going on. Obviously, that could have been a malicious script that was being injected. So we had to pare back those permissions, and we decided that on the instantiation of the DevTools panel, we would inject the code at that point. So it was less intrusive, still required quite broad-based permissions. But we had to be very thoughtful about that aspect of it. And beyond that as well, the way an extension is set up, imports and exports are a little bit more finicky than they would be otherwise. Chrome supports ES6 imports and exports, but actually a lot of packages, for example, D3, don't have default exports. So in order to get all the information you want in, we ended up going with Webpack and bundling the extension. One additional thing actually on the dev flow, when you're building a web application, you can just fire up a server, make changes. You can use Webpack Hot Reloading and Hot Module Reloading to update changes as you're making changes to it. That's much more difficult with the extension environment. We used Webpack, and we used a Webpack extension reloader tool, which was very, very useful. But it has some quirks. It uses things like eval, which Chrome extensions don't like. And also the nature of making a tool that sits within the dev panel means that it only instantiates when you open DevTools. And in order to cancel that remove that instantiation, you have to shut DevTools again. So even with hot reloading, there's a process you have to go through where you're refreshing the extension, opening and closing DevTools, and it gets a little bit clunky. So there was it was a big learning curve. I've made Chrome extensions in the past, but not to this depth. And that was a real learning curve, getting our teeth into the permissions and that side of things.
I just want to tag onto that. Henry's being very humble right now, but that hot module reloading setup was absolutely pivotal in the success of the entire project. Like I built an extension a couple months back, and having to reload the extension every single time, going through like actual Google tabs to like click reload and that kind of, it gets out of hand, especially with a larger project. So we're very grateful to Henry for setting that all up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I never thought about this, but I never even realized there was a review process for these extensions. But it makes total sense because, like you said, I mean, Harry looks pretty trustworthy. I mean, he doesn't look like the sort of person that would, inject a malicious hook into everybody's sites. But I guess if your extension's running on all pages, like, I guess you could do that sort of thing, right? Quite easily, actually.
100%, yeah. There's a lot of scope for malicious actors, and the extensions teams at Chrome and Firefox do try to kind of alleviate some of that risk by having clearly defined permissions, but also flagging it up to the user and then putting you through those additional steps to get it signed off, which is a pain from the developer perspective, but totally understandable from the user's perspective.
It truly is a pain, because I believe the first time we even got rejected from Chrome, we have to resubmit it again because we didn't complete certain things when we submitted for review. So Chrome is very, very thorough with their extensions.
That's reassuring.
Yeah.
It's reassuring, yeah.
Roughly how long are the review times, just out of curiosity?
Firefox was pretty quick. Well, they took 48 hours, I think, to go over it. Chrome, we were failed off the bat the first time, which meant that we ended up, when we were releasing our product, we didn't do it without it being in the Chrome store, which was a pain, but there we go. But then when we finally got them to go, we fixed the things that they mentioned. It was about a 4 to 5 day period. But I think we were lucky. From looking around, it seems like it's an opaque process, but B, it seems like a process that varies hugely on the type of application you're creating or extension you're creating. There's people who were saying that they've been sitting there waiting for authorization for weeks, months, and more.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Henry, but that authorization process is also dependent on the type of permissions you're trying to pass through, right?
100%. So you could pile back the permissions that we wanted and get a quicker approval process. They have even automated approval if you're not using any sort of tougher permissions. For example, one area we investigated was, rather than automatically injecting the script to get the data out, the user could click on a little button up in the top right-hand corner of their browser, and that would inject the script. That would have meant a much quicker approval time, because we're using a thing called active tab as opposed to all URLs permissions, and it would have made life a lot easier from a Chrome perspective. But ultimately, it would have given a far clunkier and far less kind of usable user experience. So we avoided that and went for the higher permissions in the end.
I just noticed Pete had to drop. He has a meeting starting in 1 minute. We have a client that's got over 1,000 screens in this React app. It's completely insane. He uses Kendo, by the way, TJ. So he had to go take care of business. But I did dig up this shirt, Henry, because I don't know if this is legible, but if you only had this, the approval would have been easier. A shirt for every occasion, folks. That's what I say.
Where did you get your hands on one of those?
Oh, a friend of mine named Shlomi Gans gave it to me. I ran a tech conference for a while, and he, I guess he was thanking me for picking his talk, which really wasn't. I should be thanking him, but I guess he had them made, and it's very appropriate. Running arbitrary code, what could go wrong?
So I know one question I have is, so the extension is Chrome and Firefox. What's the situation like in Safari and Edge? I think those would be the other two big players. I see some Smile too around, which always means there's some interesting story behind this.
We haven't tackled that one yet. Given there's a lot of parity between the Chrome API and the Firefox API, we focused on that really because we knew we could quickly cover off the two. Perhaps it would be as easy to move it over to Safari, but as far as I'm aware, I'm not sure how complex that is, and I haven't really investigated it hugely. But that would be something we'd love to add in the future.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know how many JavaScript developers are only using Safari for development. That would surprise me if it was a big number, but then again, a lot of things surprise me. That's why I don't have the lottery numbers.
Yeah, that's another reason why we just chose Chrome and Firefox, due to the large number of developers who are using it.
So you did mention there are some stylistic differences in writing code between the two. Do you have to host any platforms or have any server space anywhere for this, or is it all kept in the extension stores, respectively?
For us, it's all in the extension store. You can if you have a more complex application, and you can have external links to external databases, and you can be hosting stuff on external servers, but ultimately that comes with the additional permissions issues and additional sort of sign-off times when you're going through the process. So we didn't opt for that and didn't really have a need for it in this application.
Yeah.
Essentially, your background script that is part of the extension architecture serves as your back end. Really, like you handle all connections to all the tabs in one central background script, so it kind of works as its own browser hosted backend.
Yeah, I thought that'd be good to
stuff there as well.
kind of talk through, because some folks who may want to use this might be in regulated environments, and they'd want to know, if there's any chance for data leakage or extra compliance oversight or anything like that. So it sounds like if their compliance department's good with the extension store, then they're good with you.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. We don't, no data leaves the application, the extension. Basically, we have no external links. There's no scripts in there that either pull data or send data out of the application of the extension. So you're safe in that regard. But I would imagine if you have a very strict compliance department, having worked in companies with very strict compliance departments in the past, I would imagine the issue would probably be getting it off the store, being allowed to access the store rather than actually, our app itself.
Yeah, fun fact, I went to work for a defense contractor once, and my first week I didn't have a computer. It was a security risk. They said, just read this documentation. I'm like, what do I do with the next 7 hours of my day? But, the rules are there for a reason, I'm pretty sure. They had all the USB things super glued, couldn't put anything in there. Pretty locked down.
Yeah. I had the same working in finance. You weren't allowed to do any work on a computer that wasn't a work computer. Not allowed to email yourself any documentation, no USBs, the whole shebang.
Yeah, it works.
So, TJ and I have extensive experience in open source, so we totally get, the joy and the blood and the pain of what you're doing. It might be fun to spend a couple minutes discussing like how you would accept contributions, what that process looks like. Like, is it only big features you need, or are there, tiny nibbles someone can do to help out without, taking on a 6-month heads down task? Can you talk through some of those concepts?
Yeah, there are tons of like little tasks that we were trying to push through on the feature side right towards the end, and we didn't really get them in. For example, like the autocomplete on the search functionality, like that's something that's it is kind of involved, but it's not like a monumental task. That's definitely something one person could code away at on their own. So anything like that, feel free to get in touch with us, and we'd love to talk to you, anyone.
What is setting up the project like for a new person?
It should be pretty straightforward. We have our GitHub repo out there publicly, and you'll just fork and clone that, do your install, and the hot module extension environment that Henry set up should be all set up for you as well. So the process should be pretty straightforward, actually.
Yeah, if I remember right, there's an email address on your GitHub page where you can sort of speak to the team. Is that something you check often and monitor?
That's Horatio's job.
We do try to check it as often as possible, at least once a week, to see if there's any complaints or if anyone has any suggestions or whatnot.
So it seems like if someone wants to get involved, it's pretty straightforward, and if they get stuck, you're around to help them.
Yeah,
100%. Our LinkedIn profiles are on there as well, so if people want to contact us through that, they can do that directly. Just alluding back to what Harry was saying, there's a variety of different features we'd love to get added and for people to contribute towards. They vary from big stuff like the performance stuff to smaller things like helping us pad out the testing. We'll try and I'll make a point after this to just update the GitHub. We've got a few of the sort of potential ideas laid out there, but it'd be good to just put a more comprehensive list so if people did want to get involved, the information was there. And in terms of getting involved, we don't have a formalized process as such at the moment. Just get in contact, submit a PR. We're approachable and happy to chat, and we'd love for people to get involved.
Hey, you sound like good folks.
Hopefully.
Yeah, you have any other plans to help get the word out? Just because I think this is a super useful tool, but I think the challenge, I know for someone who works in like dev advocacy, if I can get the words out, sometimes getting the word out, getting people to care and find out about this is a challenge. Do you have any plans on sort of helping to spread the word?
I've been tweeting. I'm sorry, you go, Horatio.
One thing we had in mind was we wrote to just write a couple more articles on Medium, possibly, and on Hacker News. We did write on Hacker News, but maybe resubmit it again, maybe promote it again on Product Hunt and Twitter, as Henry was just about to say, just tweeting it more. And yeah, generally just put it out there on our social medias or just websites that developers use.
Yeah, Henry tweets at Dan Abramov almost every day now.
Yeah. It's like, please retweet me, Dan. Not had any success yet.
I'm sure he's a big target, though. Everybody wants him.
Yeah, he has such difficulties getting his grasp around React applications.
I think too, this would make for a pretty interesting sort of conference style talk too, just because there's a lot of interesting things in here. And I think sort of unique angles that at least were new things to me, just some of the extension stuff and then how the extension itself works too, like getting into React's internals. Because I know like for me, if you approached me with this problem before I'd ever heard of this, I would just look at you and just go, I wouldn't even know where to start diving into this from either perspective. So I think there's a lot of cool stuff to talk about here.
We felt like that when we first kicked off. There was a lot of whiteboarding sessions, a lot of planning and goals, laying out of goals before we actually got into the nitty gritty of it. But it's been a very, very fun project to work on. So
do I recall right that you did this as part of a open source accelerator? Was that right?
Yeah, so OS Labs is an open source accelerator, so it works with engineers who want to do more open source work, basically. And then we met through an engineering kind of fellowship, which is called Codesmith, which is where we got introduced to the OS Labs side of things.
Was that an in-person group, or did you meet virtually?
Supposed to be in person.
Enough said. Well, that's actually pretty interesting because I think, if there's one thing we've all learned a lot about lately is trying to coordinate and interact effectively virtually. Can you talk through like how you got on the same page as a group and who took what roles, and maybe, if you've learned anything about how to be more effective at this type of organization and collaboration, maybe just share your thoughts and ideas about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Henry would love to talk about this. He was definitely the OCD representative of our group
in the best
way. I'll pass on to Horatio for this one because we use Notion heavily, but Horatio has taken the reins now and is the Notion guru, so he can talk a bit more about the process we went through and implement that. I think Fan as well would be great. She's been very useful in that aspect.
Thanks, Henry. So Henry had the great idea to use Notion, which it's sort of like this web app as well as a Mac and Windows application where it's very similar to like Google Drive, but it's much more intuitive and easy to use. And over there we would just update each day with our little board of what everyone has to do, ideas that we just throw out, or any questions or whatnot. We used also Excalidraw to whiteboard since we're such a big distance. All of us just love Excalidraw, which is just a very great whiteboarding tool that you could use with other people. And just the communication overall, we just use Slack. We just talk to each other all the time. And we would have stand-ups at least twice a day, usually in the morning and in the afternoon, just to see where everyone's at. And the way we divided the work, we decided in the beginning that Henry and Fan, they would focus more on the front end, and me and Harry focused more on the back end functionality of the whole project. So we would pair program, or we would just help each other out. For example, for the search functionality, I had to collaborate with Henry a lot to get the nodes from the D3 into it. So the collaboration was very good because we were always on the same page.
Yeah, Horatio kind of alluded to this, but it was a very organic process. Like I was mainly focused on the React side of things, and parsing through the data, sending it over to Henry. But for like 3 or 4 days there, I worked really closely with Fan on getting the front end set up, and we actually tried to go like a TDD route with that and set up a Jest testing suite before getting too deep into that. So it was actually very cool to kind of bounce around. And if you got, like I had many times over the course of this process had enough with recursion for a couple days time, and it was very nice to be able to touch all parts of the extension pretty much.
Fan, what was your experience like?
I thought that it was really great because not only so like in the beginning, right? I think the hardest part about starting the project is you don't know like where exactly you're starting, because the picture is so big, and I think Henry was like a really instrumental part in just kind of like laying out like all of those ideas and really breaking it down. Like for the Notion board that we were using we were using like the Kanban board, so everybody was kind of like putting down like tasks that they were thinking that they would like to do, and then getting really granular with just kind of like very specifically just kind of like what everybody is going to be doing like step by step. And during our stand-ups, and even like outside of stand-ups too, like we would get together as a group, and everybody would share like all the pieces that they're working on in like so much depth, so even though for example, Henry works very largely on the D3 aspect of the project, we were all able to understand like what's going on because he was able to like walk through things like step by step. And like when Harry was working through the like recursive algorithm, just being able to kind of like work on it with him and to like have him just kind of like walk through all of those steps really helped like click all of those pieces together to kind of like make it into what it is right now. So yeah, I really thought that our like the workflow and just the way that everybody was able to just kind of like contribute and work together was really fantastical.
Yeah, it seems like you had a lot of fun and did a lot of great things, And Fan, I'll just stay with you since you're talking. What did you get out of this project personally?
So for me, I think like a lot of it is, so like for me, I think it was really hard to kind of like know exactly like where to start and exactly just kind of like and also like utilizing the sorts of resources that are out there, because there are so many. Like when do you choose like what sorts of resources do you want to use and which ones you want to focus on, and when do you realize that like that this resource is not like really working out for you, and then also like how to really effectively communicate with team members to get across just kind of like either where, for example, my struggles were, or like where I would like to focus more on, or just kind of like how I could continue to like collaborate like more in depth with everyone. I think like when it comes to kind of working together in projects, those are all really, really important things to kind of take into account. And I honestly couldn't have asked for like a better team, because everybody was just so incredibly like responsive and like and just like the amount of like dedication that everybody put into the project, and just like how much they were able to kind of like work with me particularly, it was yeah, like those were like things that I thought that that like I really took away from that, outside of just kind of like really learning about like how to create like a development tool that is going to be something that is like really helpful for lots of other developers.
That's fascinating, and that I'm impressed by the team myself, because obviously each one of you had a choice whether to get up today and do something with the project or not, and I'm sure at times that was more tempting than others. I do want to kind of go back around the room in the reverse circle and just see on a personal note what each one of you got out of it. Harry, what did you get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I had been wanting to do for a while was just to dip my toes in D3 and see what that was all about. So that absolutely was really helpful in just getting exposure to that. In terms of like, I feel like it's really helped me like just understand basic computer science fundamentals. Like, not saying I didn't understand them before, but like
Sure.
knowing, really complex recursion patterns, being able to parse this data, send it to the front end on the extension. It actually took a lot more thoughtful work than was anticipated, really. Like, I thought the data would be kind of in a somewhat manageable form, but it took so much crunching, so much manipulating before it was presentable to anyone, really. So just like data wrangling, that was the main thing I was dealing with, and I feel like I've really grown a lot in that regard.
So it sounds like you had some opportunities here that you might not have got at your day job.
Right, exactly.
Nice. Horatio?
I would say for me, just like a very high overview, just learning how to break down such a huge problem, because we decided like, yeah, we'll create this extension that will essentially get all the data from React, but how do you actually break that down into like smaller pieces to make that work? That was a huge part because I've never worked on such a big project before. And then I worked a lot with Harry on the back end, and just being able to see how like much more, as he mentioned, aspects of computer science, like recursion applied, like very complex recursion applied. That was really, really cool. And as well as the D3, Henry played a big part on Henry and Fan played a big part on D3, just seeing how that being able to be displayed on screen, that was really cool. So yeah, overall, just learning a lot.
Nice.
And being able to with some great people.
And it sounds like you're dipping your toe into marketing as well.
A little bit.
Henry?
Well, beyond working with an awesome team, that's been the highlight for me, really. Everyone on the team has had a really solid contribution to the project, and we've all learned loads off each other. I'd say my learnings beyond that come from sort of one side is the process that you go through when you work in a remote environment. I've worked in remote jobs before, but I feel like everyone being under quarantine has forced us all to just hone our abilities to work together in a collaborative environment, online. And so we had to be very, very structured in how we laid everything out, using Notion, using Excalibur, just to ensure that everyone was on the same page and everyone was, knew what they should be working on. So that was one side, the process of like the development process we went through. And then in particular, I went really deep dive with D3, and Fan and I really got under the hood of D3, creating the panel visualization. I had familiarity with it before. I now feel reasonably well versed in it, and as I alluded to earlier, it's a huge library with lots of possibilities. It's very kind of low level in the tools it gives you. So that was an awesome learning that I took away from this, was really getting stuck in with D3 and working out how to visualize the data and focus on that from not only a performance perspective, but like a user interaction perspective. That was an awesome part for me.
Nice. If this thing worked out as the most amazing way possible in a year, what happened?
You get buying a yacht, have like put the extension name on the yacht, ride around the Mediterranean. Like, yeah.
Episode 2 will be on the yacht.
Yeah. Well, awesome would be contributing. From my perspective, awesome would be contributing to the React dev tools, because there's so much cool information in there. And if we were able to get an opportunity to work on that and utilize the learnings we've had to better kind of visualize and make more interactive the React dev tool stuff, and ultimately get a job at Facebook.
Yeah, I was going to say, and let's hope this wouldn't happen, but even if Facebook thought this was a cool tool and built it out on their end without contacting us whatsoever, I think that would even be cool, because it would show that we had an idea that was actually applicable to the industry.
Got a comment too of I'm always awful with usernames, so you all can help me out too. But Just another positive comment about
Holiday.
how much was accomplished with everything being remote, which I totally agree with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna say Joju, but I agree. I think it was incredible. Like we were all kind of like bummed out also, just like being inside all the time, obviously. So it was cool to wake up every day and know that you had something to tackle that day and you had people on your side with that small thing.
Yeah.
At this point, is there anything else that we haven't gotten to or talked to? Any interesting stories or challenges you wanted to bring up that we haven't covered to this point?
I noticed someone in the comments mentioned D3, which was another aspect of the project that took a lot of thinking, really. So perhaps we could go into a little bit on that. As we talked about, Harry was responsible, or Harry and Horatio on the back end were basically delivering to the front end a data set, a component hierarchy, and then we had to take that data set using D3, pass all through the data, and visualize that in the DevTools panel. That was no mean task in terms of showing the data in an interactive and sort of intuitive way for users, but also trying to do it in a performant manner as well, given the size of the data sets and the fact that we're working with arbitrary size data sets of, there was a lot of variables involved in that. And Fan and I worked a lot on trying to ensure that the user experience when displaying the tree was as performant as possible. So that was an area that took a lot of thinking. One thing we tried to do was to ensure performance, ensure that when the data was displayed, there wasn't any notable lag for users. We had to be very strategic in how we structured what we painted onto the DevTools panel. So we sort of front-loaded visual components, separated out the addition of event listeners and added them afterwards once the user had a tree displayed to them. So that was another rabbit hole we went down in terms of sort of developer issues, getting our teeth into that. There was a lot of learnings there. I noticed someone mentioned about using D3 with React in the comments. I've done that a little bit before. There's lots of libraries that can help you with that. We didn't have that difficulty in this project, but in terms of general D3 links, there's a website called D3 In Depth with a guy from the UK who writes a sort of tutorial on getting the basics of D3 together. I'd highly recommend that as a resource if people wanted to dive more into the D3 side of things. And then, yeah, you need to take that for one level further when you're integrating it with React, because they fight over the DOM elements, basically.
Well, I mean, no matter who's fighting, you get about 16 milliseconds per frame if you want to run at 60 frames a second. So you got to be really careful what happens.
Yeah.
For D3, I think, Henry, Amelia Waterberg's blog you mentioned was really good. D3.
Yes. She's awesome. She's got a fantastic blog with loads of excellent resources, and she's also got a book which is called D3 In Depth, I believe. Big, thick, very, very practical book on getting stuck into using D3. It takes you through a variety of different chart types and visualizations. It's really, really awesome, and she writes very, very well, so highly recommended. Oh, it's not D3. I'm not sure what it is, but it's Amelia Wattenberger, and she has Full Stack D3 is the name of the book, and it's awesome.
Nice.
Cool. Well, anything else before we wrap up today? Any exciting stories? Anything else you want to share?
I made a logo. A logo.
That is
it's on
visual arts for the win.
Yeah, that was fun. That was kind of a side project within the project, but other than that,
yeah.
That is always that's the funnest part of making a project. Who named the thing, actually? I'm curious.
I think that was Harry too, right?
Yeah, pretty sure.
It's interesting because, we all have day jobs, but it sounds like on this project you've gotten to do a lot of interesting things that you just might not have gotten the opportunity to do. And not only that, but you get some satisfaction knowing you're helping poor React developers try to figure out what their app's doing. There's nothing worse than trying to debug something and guessing your way through how the app's working. And with this tool, you can just cut right through the guesswork, see what's happening, make a quick fix, and start delivering more value. I'm impressed, and I think, if you could hear my applause, great job, team. And especially great job with the pandemic, throwing a wrench into the works. Hats off, and you guys did a great job. This will be recorded, so if it's useful for your kind of promotional activities, we'll follow up with you when it's posted on YouTube. Certainly if there's something we can do to help spread the word, and I know there's some ways, just let us know, and we'll do whatever we can.
Yeah, and Joju is a fan of the eye logo, and I actually did not notice it because when I first looked at it, it had already loaded, so I didn't actually see the animation. So I just saw the React bit. I made sure to reload because I was like, did I miss something? And like, sure enough, here, I'll post a link to if you just want to see the GIF itself, I'll post that in
was
here.
also,
You can check it out.
Totally awesome.
The GIF.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time to come tell us about it, tell us about the tool. And I'm going to drop just one more time the link to just the straight up GitHub repo. So if anybody, find the right button there, if anybody is interested in following up, checking it out, the link will be the last thing posted in here. And if you're watching this on YouTube afterwards, so we post these up to YouTube, we'll make sure that link is in the description of the video as well. So you can scroll down and find that as well. And I think the last thing I have to plug from our angle from Code It Live, if you are joining us today, we are doing an all-day stream tomorrow on the Code It Live channel. So hop back in tomorrow, do all the trendy things like comment, subscribe, right? This is where I'm supposed to give that pitch.
Smash that like button.
Smash that like button. Yeah, I need to have like a video I run that's got this sort of thing automated. But I feel like I can't, I have to be 20 years younger to authentically really get in that mode, because I don't know, it just feels awkward to me. Maybe I could have Dan do it, because Dan's marketing.
Yeah, you definitely need like, comment, subscribe, and you also need more fire emojis. If I run through the comments here, I don't see a lot of fire emojis.
Yeah, you're
Come
right.
on, commenters, smash those fire emojis. So on my side, once again, I work with Digital Primates. We curate the Enterprise React newsletter. We'll stick a link here in the comments. And so if it's the kind of content you like, subscribe. We don't sell your information anywhere. We're just trying to put out the best news that's going on in the React ecosystem.
Awesome stuff. And Joju says it didn't feel awkward. So maybe I just have to, it's all about confidence, right? If I just deliver it confidently, then no one's going to care. So, all right. Thanks again, everybody. It was a great chat.
Thank you so much for having us,
you all.
by the way. Thanks.
Right on.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for
Thank you so
having us.
much.
All right.
Have a good day.
See you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
See you.